organic as I could possibly make them. I used as many materials from field and forest as I could, and even for motifs, I would. Could someone focus? I can't even tell whether they're in focus. For my motifs, I tried to replicate barks and sands and grasses and furrowed fields and everything that I saw in nature. And my feeling was, as more of us were spending more time indoors in cities, that this was what we needed, and how to encapsulate organic rhythms into fiber. This is a drapery fabric. This is a first sample I did in the early days of haystack in about 1953 or 4, and the whole idea that weaving was always parallel to the warp I was wondering about, and playing with the idea of tilting the beater and getting eccentric wefting. And also another fabric that grew out of a haystack summer of looking at brilliant flowers and iridescence that one finds in nature, and how bright could I be without being vulgar. It was part of our first collection, the Spice Garden collection, called Remulade, about 1954. And these are not hand-spun yarns, but yarns specially made by a co-worker named Scott McNutt in Donegal, the west coast of Ireland, and by hand-feeding yarn into fiber of different colors and characters into the sliver machine, and then spinning the yarn from that, we got endless repeats of yarn that have very much the character of hand-spun yarns. This is from the Mushrooms collection. I've twice worked with J.B. Stevens on domestics. Had the first designer collection of sheets and towels in 1964. This is from about that period. It is a terry bath towel, and I'm not sure that it's the best towel ever designed, but it's certainly the most complex ever woven. It has 3 warps and every combination of sculpturing and texture patterns and striping and so forth that is available. It's called architecture. A little bit related to the Remulade, this is from our first African collection. Power woven, designed on a hand loom, using many yarns in combination to get a jewel-like richness in the upholstery fabric. In the late 50s, I started working with warp knitting, which is much faster than weaving, and for shears, produces a cloth that does not slip and is dimensionally stable. And using these plastic ribbons and monofilaments, I like their machine aesthetic, and I like the twisting that was going on and the variety in the way the supplementary warps curled and buckled, and the sheen on these silvery gray yarns that when it's draped and light falls on it is much like a sheer waterfall, and therefore again organic in its character. The first print on velvet in 1959, upholstery print, is on my side, called Primavera, here combined with some coordinates. The one on the far side is hand-spun, hand-woven in Haiti, and it was the first time we used 4 harnesses in a 2-harness weaving culture. The Irish collection in the middle 60s, and using hand looms and jacquard looms and fairly forthright middle-of-the-road upholsteries and draperies. And here is the beginning of the beige 70s. The mural fabric on the far wall was an innovation in that it's a serigraph or screen print, 10 feet by 10 feet square. The fabric is woven 10 feet wide and used length for width, and that makes it possible to go all the way around a room without a seam, which visually is good and economically is fine. The shear, which you can barely see in the corner nearest me, is done with a devore process in which we're weaving or knitting a cloth with an extra heavy element in cotton. And then we print with acid to burn away the rest of the cloth and get a very sheer net. Here's another one of those murals. This one's 10 feet by 16 feet in size. The coordinated sheer version of it draped, and the ikat fabric we hand weave in Thailand. It is a true weft ikat, it's silk. And there is some very fine French metal in it that originally only came in for the Queen's wardrobe. The concept collection was the first time we had Larsen carpets and Larsen leathers, and I wanted to tie them in to the fabrics and did it through pattern and through color. A very tightly coordinated collection in which the coordination became the design. This is a Wilton woven wool carpet in 2 levels, and a great deal of change, more than showing here, from one square to another. The cut pile is quite deep. My inspiration were tiles I found in Afghanistan that were terracotta and very rough, and particularly with antiquity, and set way down deep inside were brilliantly glazed areas that were smooth and had color, and I was thinking, how can I get this into carpet? And this is the result. Not all of the colorways are as neutral as this one.
How large are the squares?
About 4 inches. And here, using the same yarns, but an all-level loop carpet, and using the same quadrangular motif, but doing ombre shading in 4 heather yarns to get a total of 7 shades, is a carpet made with the same yarns, which was good from an inventory point of view, but also in use. And the idea is that one could, there are plain carpets in all of these shades, both cut and uncut, also from the same inventory. And that one might do the library in this and a plain carpet, the rest of the area, and then the dining room and boardroom, the one we saw first. Here is that carpet that you saw. It does have a 6-foot repeat. This is an old 19th century bank that was refurbished in Cleveland. And as we knew that this traffic area would have to be replaced more often than the other, making it different would make that easier. And also, only doing about 1/3 of the total area in the Wilton pattern and using our planar carpet for the other area made the budget balance. Thank you. This is wool again. It's a coarse spun wool over a less expensive center, but making a very heavy yarn about the size of your little finger, and then weaving it in such a way that some of it's brought up and floats a bit more, gives relief. Also that palette, this is Gallop. It's a tiny sample of it, maybe 8 inches square, but it's hand-knotted Chinese pigskin that we do in Portugal. And it makes a attractive, durable, soil-resistant carpet. San Francisco designer named Michael Taylor uses about half the world's supply. This is also a wool Wilton carpet. That is a jacquard weaving technique. It's cut pile and it's carved between color areas. There are only 4 colors involved here, but by creating 2 and 3 color tweeds of them, we're multiplying the shades possible. In Austria, in a concentration camp during the war, a man figured out a new way of weaving, and that's very rare, but it has much of the flexibility of tapestry, in that the basic weft yarn that we're seeing only travels about 1/8 of an inch back and forth. It comes off a creel like a warp in the back of the loom. It is indeed a filling, and this allows for extraordinary flexibility in pattern placement, complete, and also to beat in the filling yarn much more than if it was traveling full width. Anyone who weaves knows if you're weaving very narrow, you can weave very tightly. And the wider you weave, the less tightly you can pack the weft. And as this weft is only going 1/8 of an inch, we can make it as boardy as we want. Very durable and very soil resistant, and with a great deal of pattern flexibility. It's a small mill on the Scottish Riviera, and I've enjoyed working with them. This is a tapestry jacquard technique. It has nothing to do with tapestry itself, which is a weft interlocking, but it gives us the possibility of about 200 different color areas. There are 6 warps and 2 fillings, and designing and coloring such a fabric sort of a maximum challenge. This is a double cloth woven in Ireland called Hoffman, and one of the cloths is plaited, and in between the 2 cloths, the light gray area is stuffed with extra warps and wefts to give it sort of a Hershey bar relief. It feels good as you pass your hand over it, and creates additional shadows that do not show in this close-up. And here a still life that shows how we try to present these things. My feeling is that presenting textures and colors that work well together. Each one flatters the other, and it's much more reasonable than showing 4 colorways of that carpet or the 6 colorways of a fabric all together, and that they compete with each other. A new jacquard chenille fabric. More and more I'm designing fabrics that are reversible, because it's the only way we can guarantee coordinates that really match, that come automatically out of the same dye lot. So this one is basically warp phase, the other side is basically chenille phase. And this is a new print on velvet that we're doing in both New Jersey and West Germany. And a Wilton carpet again, a similar palette. This is called Fantasy, and what we're seeing is about a 4-foot section of it. A close-up of the weft ikat from Thailand in a newer colorway, much larger than real scale. But what I like in pattern fabric is that the pattern is in the cloth and not on it. And ikats and war prints is one of the most direct ways to get the pattern in the cloth. I designed this by tearing up Christmas cards during Christmas holiday one year, and where I tore them irregularly, pretty well replicated the irregularity on the horizontal edges, vertical edges, which is typical of ikat. I sent that out to Bangkok. I arrived 6 weeks later, and the first samples were ready for my approval, and they were about ready. Or about right. Here are 3 of our Thai silks. The one in the center is discharge printed. That is, we're weaving dyed yarns to get an iridescent solid, and then printing with bleach to produce the pattern. The one on this side is called silk canvas, and I've added a fine sewing thread of polyester to the silk to reinforce it, to make it stronger for upholstery. It also makes the warp slipperier, so we can weave it tighter than we could if it was all silk. Quite heavy, fairly durable. A new jacquard woven carpet, and this one is a combination of nylon and acrylic. The stem is designed primarily for contract use. And a carved Wilton carpet. And a close-up of one of the new plaids that we're weaving in Thailand. It's quite heavy silk, primarily for upholstery and wall covering. And a montage of last year's collection, rather consistent in color. The one in the center is a Chinese silk that I printed here. The print on the far side is velvet, and another example of the tapestry-like technique on this side. And last year I launched something called the New Brilliance, and I was eager for color, again, after working in beiges for almost 10 years. And the brilliance of poppies and even the polychrome color of ancient Greece and Rome, I thought was terrific. And no, Paris, it's had some acceptance, and no place else at all. But maybe one day. It was interesting Then when I did my first silk collections at the end of the 60s, I showed them to a Paris fashion guru who was also a friend named Andre Putman. And she looked and startled and said, "But Jacques, you know the color is over." And I looked at her, and she was in layers of ecru silk and ivory. And thought, well, maybe she's right. And so I tried to work without color or pattern, and certainly texture, for a good long time. Last year, Andre brought a show to our Museum of Modern Art in New York on the work of Eileen Gray. And at dinner, I said, "Andre, color is back." And she said, "Oui, Jacques, and it is black." She may be right. These have been less popular than anything I've done in a long time. I like their freshness. This polychrome I find difficult at the pale blue, reddish orange, and yellow. This seems to work for me. And here's a new process in America. It's resist printing, where we're adding a resist to each of the colors we printed on the velvet, and then flooding over the top of it with the background color. And this means we don't have overlays where one color is crossing another.
What's the resistance?
What is it?
Yeah.
I don't know. In fact, my printer is very careful. It's his trade secret. And he brought the process to us to design with. He thought it would be interesting. It is very. And he's not at all convinced. Double cloth, I guess, is my favorite weaving technique. And I like the fact to create a positive negative between the front and back of such cloths. So these are coordinated groups. There are 3 patterns in each colorway, and back and front multiplies it to 6. So it means not only that our clients have a choice of combining or selecting one side or the other. It means our inventory, and more importantly, our sampling, is cut in half. And economically, that's good design. This is another double cloth, but jacquard woven, also in Worcester, down in England. And you can see that on one side, on one face, the lines are dark and the other light. A close-up of a machine embroidery that we first, fabric that we first did for the Opera House in Phoenix. And we were asked to come up with a curtain the size of the Metropolitan Opera that would have perhaps some of the excitement of the mirrored fabrics of England, of India, and trying to figure out how we might do that at any price. Machine embroidery over mirror mylar seemed like a reasonable solution. And when people are waiting expectantly for the curtain to rise, they are all involved in a light projected off of the curtain, much like the old-fashioned ballroom sphere, and that's rather effective. The original one had colors of the Southwest and worked relatively well. An embroidery machine embroiders samples 10 feet wide, or 10 yards wide, by full width. And each time we make the sample, we were involved in several $1,000s of specially dyed yarn yarns and so on. And we had to flame proof, and my question is how to flame proof and dry clean and not have the stitching which perforated the mylar cut it. And we finally had it about right, and I sent it out to the curtain maker in Los Angeles and said, now we want you to test it for local dry cleaning. And I got a call back saying, Mr. Larsen, each half of that curtain is going to be 300 lineal yards, and there's no one in the world who will ever be able to dry clean it. And if you're lucky, they'll vacuum it occasionally. Another picture of a detail of it. The other metal is the curtain for Brown Airlines. This is a patchwork. There are many patchworks in Mendocino right now. This one is leather, and it's designed for upholstery and wall covering. A Swiss man who also invented the German battleships that disappeared into fog, self-generated fog, invented a batik printing machine, which we can economically print with hot wax by hand and secretly. And we've done that over the last 15 years or so. We are able to produce about 50 yards every other day. And this one is, for instance, is printed 3 times, and that's what's getting the various buildup of tonalities. Recent collections from the beige period, and these are all Egyptian cotton. The one at the bottom is the sheer part, which is darker, is linen. An embossed fabric that is a solar fabric engineered to reflect heat back out in the summer, back in winter, and here we've embossed it. I like doing things I don't know how to do yet, and this leads me to more and more processes and more countries and more kinds of assignments. I like that. Here is colorless, but with a maximum play of texture from dull to shiny. Bob Peterson, as you should know, is the sponsor and of this conference, chairman of ACC. And the way I met him was in the early 60s, that he was making one more world trip and seeking out what was going on creatively in crafts in various parts of the world. And he met a woman, an English woman named Eliza Wilcox, who trekked with her husband out of Nigeria when that became independent, all the way across Africa, and taken the West African technique of faux dyeing to an area that had never made fabric. In East Africa, they went from wearing skins to imported cloth with nothing in between. He wanted us to help her with styling and particularly with distribution. He felt she should have an international market. And so we started working with her. This is a Swiss woven rep. The pattern is on. She had figured out how to have 50 women pleat 50 yards of fabric all at one time. And a little man with a drum was at the end like a metronome, and each time he would beat, they would fold once. Fold, fold. And then we marked out on slats the pattern, the tying, the untying for the 2 dimes would need to be done on. And we were able to get rather consistent production from time to time. And it all worked pretty well until she was run over by a lorry, and then it's the end of the operation. But Kenya has beautiful Lincolnshire wool, and we also taught them how to spin and to weave. They would break into the weave studio to get to weave extra. It was a great experience for us. But here, the fusion of a liquid dye and a thirsty cloth is really expressed. Anyone can re-experience that magic, and that's what I like best in an ornamented cloth. This is a collection of cloths all related to ecot. Some are ecots, some are warp prints we do in Korea. There are also carpets and woven patterns based on ecot type motifs. The last time I'll show this fabric. But you get an idea how it changes as the colorings change. When I originally was weaving, I felt that if I designed something in red, that it was a red fabric, and it was rather immoral to ever try to make it into a yellow or blue one. But I've changed in that. Here is extreme richness in a palette I call Macedon. It's a carpet over on the other side that seems so very rich, and is. This is discharge printing again in Thailand. Here we're bleaching out the color from a yarn-dyed silk and inlaying a new color. So far we cannot discharge print in America. I enjoy doing it in Asia and Europe. Here's a close-up of that silk canvas. And this iridescent color that I'm liking so well, which is made up of complements. This is a dull red and a dark dull green. And I was looking at my red maple leaves a year and a half ago, and how can I do that? And sometimes we're able to. One of our most popular palettes at the moment. I'm staying at the bridal suite of the Mendocino Hotel, which they've used some of these fabrics. This is the same technique I described to you, but a newer pattern we call Labyrinth, in which we've done even more striping of the two beams. In fact, we've used the equivalent of a third beam to get still more colors working. A double cloth, front and back. The lower part is presumably the front, the upper part is the other face. It's called Landis, and I did it in collaboration with Richard Landis, the Arizona weaver, who had done something like the face. In order to get all of these colors in stock, because no one could afford to dye so many, I had to go to Switzerland and to use a yarn too slippery for a double plain weave. So I converted it to a double quill, and then in the process of working on it, realized that another fabric could be woven on the back that was attractive in itself. And so I did the plaid on the back of his face. And it's that upper part that became the motif for our Paris poster. A close-up here. You can see the tie-downs in a wool version. They're rather an unnecessary evil. But this one's back to plain weave. A few shots of the Paris show itself. Here you see the same old carpet, but in another colorway. It's called Quadrangle. And this is from the foyer up to where the show begins. The only other American to have a one-man show in the Palais du Louvre was Mark Tobey of Seattle. And he was an old friend of mine. I'd seen his show in 1959, and I thought it was cute that another Seattleite was shown there again. This is the entrance to the exhibition, a rather nasty corridor into the first gallery. And the installation designer came up with this. The retrospective was gotten away with on one long wall, about 150 feet, showing some of the milestones. On the other side was a nice play of colored silks, a kinetic experience. And the galleries were broken up into materials and techniques and Larsen color and various aspects. There were six of these galleries. It was our carpet that was installed throughout. It was curious to see famous, meticulous curators installing carpet on the floor. And somehow it's the way they did it. There's another one of the murals in this gallery, which is dedicated to pattern. This is our Ritz chair, a very popular carpet called Happiness. Plays of sheer fabrics, Corbusier chair with one of our upholsteries. And here is a bigger example of the Kenya fold-up. Beyond that, another Bachi. Part of the color gallery with the massive long colorway of fantasy, foreground carpet. And commissions, there's some porcelain here in prototype for dance. In the first two cases, one of the 28 panels from the Sears Bank, one of our upholstery series for granite, and a prototype. It's a wool velvet plush made into a curtain for the Metropolitan Opera. Close-up of that. Fortunately, they never afforded it, even though they paid for the design commission. And when the space finally opened, this would have come to the floor of the Grand Salon on the second floor. And I think any child under 8 would have been unable not to try to climb it. So it went up about 80 feet, and we went all in trouble. Beyond the mock-up chairs is the panel from the curtain at Wolf Trap Farm, which is mohair hand-spun and hand-woven in Swaziland. And it was the biggest export that Swaziland, which is a tiny country in the middle of South Africa, had ever made when we did it. And the king, in all his regalia and necklaces and armlets and anklets and so forth, came and sat with us in the presidential box the night that it had its debut. It burned when Wolf Trap burned, but I suspect that something similar will be done when Wolf Trap is rebuilt. Focus. Here's a close-up of another colorway that is in the exhibition of this architectural towel. The last gallery of the in Paris was devoted to a discussion in French and English on what I thought might happen in the future. And the technique of the theater is something I'm playing with. I'm working in India with the largest mill complex in Asia, who are sponsors of handcraft. And so this is their mosquito netting, dyed black and discharge printed, and then appliqued by hand in silk to create these layered illusory patterns. And a few of the fabrics, here's another one of the mural casements. It is called Seascape, and it grows out of my feeling that most of us in cities would at like 5 o'clock to be alone on a deserted beach. And maybe the fabric would at least help to create that illusion. An aerial view of my country house in East Hampton, which is obsessively round. There's still more rounds than are shown here. Can you move it my way just a bit? No, it doesn't make any. The very far side is the newest blue garden. And if you could see it very carefully, you would see that the blue stones are laid out in an interlaced pattern. I was really excited about, I went to Africa first to look at their architecture, and there where every wife gets a house of their own, and the adolescent boys get a little house of their own, and pretty soon it becomes a sculptural complex, and the spaces in between are very interesting. And so I've worked on that idea, and it's coming along well. Here you can see the blue garden in the foreground. This was a benefit last year for Bill Moss, who makes tents, and the local art museum used it to raise money. And some of Bill's extraordinary tents. One of his new projects will be all of the living quarters for the Los Angeles Olympics. Close-up of the house and the wisteria over the conservatory that works wonderfully to keep it cool in summer. The leaves go away, it allows the summer sun to come in. Here is one of Bill's tents at the end of the pond. This one I still have and use as a summer dining room. It's our solar reflective cloth, and it's wonderful because it also reflects the candlelight back into the room. And here I'm in the blue garden, and I think that's about it. Lights, please. Focused so well is Bridget McCarthy, outgoing trustee of the American Craft Council, who's just published a new book called Architectural Crafts. It's in paperback and inexpensive and a fine book you want to see. I would reopen this meeting to discussion for questions or comments. Yes?
You said, did you start out as a weaver or a designer?
I studied architecture. Then I learned weaving, and I had to make I didn't study fabric design. I made a synthesis between the two, which was a more personal style than I could have gotten otherwise. At one point, I was teaching design and studying weaving in the same school. Yes?
What tools do you use to translate your ideas to illustrations?
My favorite tool of all is the opaque projector, in which we can work small and then in an opaque projector, I think most of you have seen, you project it large and you try out scales. And if the repeat is 36 inches, do we do this motif 36 inches or 18 or 9 or 6? We use that very open-endedly to figure out. And sometimes we say, well, look at that motif is good in all 3 scales. So we'll do that scale for the carpet, this one for the casement, and that will do for a carved upholstery or something of that sort. But I use that a lot. I also use photo presentation. When I was lecturing at Well College, I was in the middle of designing this domestics collection. And I had to be involved almost every day on it because we had a deadline. We would take slides we were first of all intending to project. We were working small for the presentation fee. And would project the size of a towel or a sheet. And one of my ways of thinking is if that's all they're seeing for the presentation fee, they can't say that your job is finished because we accept it, because all they had seen was an image projected. But anyway, the slides would get over to me in London overnight. I would project them up the size of the sheet or the towel and telex. Yes, no, smaller, bigger, lighter, cooler, whatever. But it worked very well as a means of transmitting quickly visual material.
And was it on paper, your presentation?
No, our presentation was only slides.
I mean, were the slides taken of pieces on paper?
Yes. Mm-hmm. And they knew what a towel looked like. So that wasn't the problem. Yeah.
Do you have your work done in all these other countries because of economic reasons or because they are equipped? Say, when you go to India for batik or England for this type of work?
At first I consciously wanted to. And I developed clients who wanted these fabrics. People like Marcel Breuer would say, I haven't seen such wonderful hand-spun, hand-woven fabric since the old country. Can I have more of it? And then people began to come to us, saying, we're from Colombia, and we have marvelous looms. We just need a market, and need some help on color, and we come down, and so on. Then the government of India, the government of Ireland, and so on. So it was partly push, and a lot of it was pull. And how can we help these people develop a market? We've just been working with the Uruguayans, marvelous wools, with streaky colors, and that's been a treat.
So if you go to another country or another mill, is it also the idea that you spoke about this morning where you might do the design and buy it and try it back?
Always. Almost always. In India, that was only partially the case. They'd set up these weaver service centers to help to create export. Pierre Cardin was invited for fashion, and I was invited for furnishings. He was wonderfully successful, because every time he saw a bunch of fabric he liked, he bought it, and then he figured out what to do with it. And I was trying to set up something that the Indians could do on time for 10 years in a row, exactly like sample. And we almost succeeded, not at all. It's different. Furnishings is a good market because it's year-round and it changes. It's not fickle, and fashion is impossible. As some of us know because they want 5 collections a year and it has to be on time. The dresses don't have to match. You see what you're buying on the rack, and if you like it, you buy it. With things of ours, somebody sees an 8-year-old sample in the showroom, decides they want it a week from Tuesday, and please won't we send it, and our 8 years later, or 18 years later, we must have it in stock, still looking like those old samples. That's difficult. It's good for the developing world, because we are so faithful, and so the change relatively slow. Yes?
Are they actually, I mean, this is actually economically, are they able to do it on their own? Are they continuing, are they developing their own markets and their own press?
It varies. We I think we always have a European, the other end of the cable, or who's someone with an American or European education who understands our sense of time and quality control. In other words, we're not working with a village, we're working with an entrepreneur in between. And we encourage them to develop the local market to use up the seconds. And in some cases, like in Bangkok, the local market is now the big one. Yes?
You spoke this morning of selling the design to the individual mill and then buying it back. Is that?
No, of licensing the mill to produce it or ordering them to, and then buying the production. Mm-hmm. Yes?
In one of the early slides, you referred to knitted warp or warp knit.
A warp knit. It's a process that's about halfway between knitting and weaving. That there is a weft and there is a warp, but it's not interlaced. It's closer to a lino, but it's not really a lino either. It's very fast and it's easy to design for.
An automatic machine, some kind? Is it a hand operation or?
Oh no, it's a mass production techniques, but it doesn't need to be done by the mile. It can be done somewhat smaller. And with these thermoplastics, we heat set them, which makes them completely dimensionally stable. And that's something thermoplastics can do. It's good. So we get casements that are resistant to everything. They don't fade, rust, sag, shrink, moths, bacteria. That's pretty good. Yeah.
Is that, you spoke of one piece you showed and you said, oh, that was acrylic done for industry. Is it the industry, big industry, when you do a design for them, are those some of the reasons why you might use acrylic?
It's a blend, it's called CR4. It's a blend of nylon and acrylic. And I'm a natural fibers man, at least my house is, my fabric house. But for offices and areas, they want more wear than wool will give for general offices and to pay less price. And I like this blend. Acrylic is not as durable as nylon, but it looks better. And by combining the two together, it's the best compromise. Yes?
Taking a question, what is the jacquard process?
The jacquard process is an attachment to a loom or a knitting machine or a lace machine or whatever. It's like a player piano. You can play a long tune on a jacquard and get much more complex pattern than you could with normal shafts. And it was an early 19th century invention, and it's the forerunner of the computer and the player piano. Yes, Michael?
Do you have hand-printed fabrics in your collection? What proportion of your collection would they be? And what dyes would you use?
We use all dyes from Switzerland, Germany, Belgium, Britain, depending on what country we're printing in. All of our American prints are hand prints, table prints. And in Germany, we use about half-half. Labor's harder to get there. They encourage us to use rotary screens, but it's not as flexible. Yes.
I was wondering what your comment would be on the industry. I just checked, I used to kind of deal in upholstery fabrics, I used to upholster things for people, and when I left off about 20 years ago, and your collections were somewhere in the $40 through $60 a yard range, and everything else was everything else. And now I notice that fabric is right around $50 to $100 a yard now, upholstery fabric.
You're speaking wholesale.
Yeah. Yeah, is there any hope for us? What are we getting into next?
My feeling is that I do not feel guilty making luxury goods. I feel that there is a need to continue very top quality and to do things that mass production cannot do. And that seems to be how I'm typecast. But I'm just as excited about the idea of creating the equivalent of sneakers and blue jeans. I mean, the old sneakers and the old blue jeans. That things like officers' chairs and so forth, everyday, classless, okay interior design that is mass produced and mass distributed, and that you're not a slob or a nobody, or if you have it, just like a t-shirt does not put you in any one class or another. And I think we need more of these furnishings, and I'd love to work on it. But this is big industry that always seems to be running scared. And the development and the risk in that is hard. I've also found from my own experience, I once wanted to design for Harlem, and research showed that most of Harlem wanted what the lower middle class had. They did not want a brave new world. They just wanted a little bit more of the strata immediately above them. I think that's it. All right.
Just one more thing. I read a bit about Bill Watson's tent, and I read about the solar fabric. What exactly is that made of, and is it durable to the sunlight?
The one we have is a warp knit polyester, very fine mesh that's been glazed with metallic, with an aluminum powder and highly polished. And it's quite durable, so it's resistant to sun degradation, the polyester. For outdoor use, I think its life will be somewhat limited. I had it in for the winter, and I think I'll get a few seasons out of it, but it's not forever.
Do they have a waterproof canopy that goes with it if it does shower?
No, it doesn't mind. It sheds water pretty well, even though it's open. The water doesn't hurt it, but it just.
Well, I was thinking what you might have inside it if you were using it.
Fine.
If you were using it in the summer and you had something inside of it, like you said, an outside dining area, if that would come in harm.
It doesn't seem to. Sometimes the tablecloth gets wet when you dry it out. I always look at more of those. Okay, thank you very much.